I imagine. We always begin these meetings with a time of silence, of just sitting in silence. And really, the reason we do this is because it's the whole foundation. The whole foundation of our being together, the foundation of really spirituality in general, is that giving attention, giving even affection, giving attention and affection to that stillness and that silence of awareness. That's really the whole foundation of. Without that foundation, then spirituality is just a collection of teachings and concepts and ideas and spiritual philosophies. But with that foundation in stillness and silence, and that foundation in awareness, because all these three things, stillness and silence and awareness, are not really three things. They're just three different names. Look, it's just looking at the same thing from three different perspectives, right? That awareness itself, or consciousness itself, is in and of itself is totally still and quiet. Mm-hmm. So maybe your mind may or may not be quiet, but that awareness, that stillness, there is a quiet. It is itself quiet, even when your mind isn't quiet. Mm-hmm. And that's a great discovery to make, that real quiet and deep quiet doesn't depend on your mind necessarily being quiet. Too many people spend way too much energy trying to quiet their mind, and they miss that there is a quietness that's there, there's a silence that's there, there's an awareness that's there, whether the mind is quiet or not. So our time together when we just sit in this silence for a few moments is to sort of help anchor you into this stillness and this awareness that's always there. Mm-hmm. To experientially sort of you get a real taste to kind of root you into that inner stillness. Because that's the essence of spirituality. And it's the essence of spirituality because it's the essence of what we are. We often get into a trance state and we think that we're this little self. We think that we are the person trying to become still, or the person trying to succeed, or the person that's looking for success or love or whatever the person is looking for. But really the person is just sort of a movement, a phenomena within consciousness, right? Rapidly moving patterns of conditioned thinking and feeling, action and reaction. And the essence of spirituality is starting to shift our consciousness from being focused on the self, the egoic self, just shifting focus on the self with all of its concerns, all of its petty demands, all of its anxieties, all the things that it's hoping to attain or to escape or demand, all the ways that oneself seeks satisfaction. It's simply a shifting of attention from that self to what we really are. It's not getting rid of that self. It's not trying to destroy that self. It's just shifting your attention. It's that little slight, it's such a small thing, just shifting that attention, just that slight shift in focus from the me, the self, it's figuring, thinking, comparing, seeking, whatever it's doing, to just awareness. And in awareness, it's all it's done. In that stillness of awareness, there is no figuring anything out. There is literally nothing to figure out. That's probably the biggest joke of spirituality at all, is that there isn't anything to figure out. All the time that we've spent trying to figure it out, has anybody... Oh, okay, y'all tried to figure it out? Yeah, okay, I want to make sure. I could just be talking to a whole room full of just natural saints that were just born, never trying to, package everything in the mind and never got trapped in their little egos and, yeah. I haven't found that room yet. So it's just that shifting of attention. That's the foundation of spirituality. There isn't anything to understand. That's the joke of it. All the attempt to understand spiritually is just more of the me seeking itself. It's like the self talking to itself. But really there isn't anything to understand. If anything, I think we understand too much. We understand a lot of things without really understanding much of anything. We have our minds way too cluttered. And adding to the clutter is not going to suddenly bring the mind into clarity. There is no thought that you're going to ingest that's going to make all thoughts suddenly make sense. Except the thought maybe there's nothing to understand. If you were going to think on anything, I think it would be much better to think on that thought. There's nothing spiritually to understand. It's just a shift of focus. And at first it may start out as a sort of willing shift, that you actually shift. You actually kind of go, well, I could have my focus in this thought pattern all the time, which is what most people do they not? They have their mind and they have their focus in their mind constantly. Literally like 98% of the time they're in their mind. And one could focus on that, of course. And then at the beginning you realize one can actually also focus on something other than that. And the mind says, well, what is there else to focus on besides my chatter? A different kind of chatter, maybe? But it's just focusing on that inner stillness. Because again, without that, then all the rest, it's just words and talk. It has to be rooted in something. In that direct experience. In your own discovery of what you really, really, really are. Until that shift happens in your consciousness when you realize that you are not that self that you have been thinking you are. Not even the self that's seeking. Not even the self that's wanting awakening or enlightenment or whatever. But what you really are is that awakeness itself. That consciousness itself. And so that's the foundation. So this is why so often in many spiritual forms of spirituality there's an encouragement to pay attention to that stillness. Unfortunately, what people do with that is they go around trying to be still all the time. You sit down to meditate and you're spending all your time trying to be still inside, trying to control your mind. And that's just a misunderstanding. trying to be still isn't a very still activity, isn't it? In fact, if you want to make your mind race, try to get your mind not to race. Try to think about how not to think. You see? It keeps one very, very involved. But there's no need to try to be still. Just notice that stillness already is. And that consciousness or awareness already is. And at all these sort of inner states of stillness and silence and peace, that they're actually already there. It's just that most people have got into a very deep habitual rut about not paying attention to them. That's what, in most human beings, they're just sort of in this rut, like a groove, well, not anymore, but when there used to be records, and you just have the needle in the groove, and most people's, there's this deep groove, worn in the record of themselves, and the groove is just thinking. That's the groove, and so that's what I pay attention to. And then if you get into spirituality, then people start to think about how not to think. Which is the same groove, actually, right? It's still thinking. But actually so much easier than that. It's all so much simpler than that. There's thinking, and then there's this totally natural state of awareness and silence and stillness. You just change what you're paying attention to. And why don't we usually do that for very long? Very simple. The reason we don't do that for very long is because you might pay attention to it for a moment, a minute, maybe 5 minutes, who knows, and then the mind will come in and say, well, this may not solve all my problems. If I just sit here listening to this silence, it might not solve. You see all the things your mind has. It might not. How do I know if I will end up enlightened? Where's my guarantee? How do I know what job to take? When am I going to find my soulmate? How do I get rid of the person I thought was my soulmate? Have you noticed this? Right? You be in stillness for just a few moments, and your mind, it's very good at coming up with something very important to think about, isn't it? And it's very compelling, right? Oh, I could always, gosh, out of this silence came this amazing imperative of something I must solve. I must think about it, right? So there's always this tendency, always a very, very good and compelling reason. Thought will say, no, you can't leave me alone for very long. You must stay in my domain. You must keep solving problems, figuring things out. Otherwise, maybe nothing will happen. Have any of you found this to be so at times? Right? I have all these sort of loose ends in my mind. I have all these unresolved issues in my life or whatever. And if I don't think about it, if I don't pursue an end to them, if I don't pursue a fix, maybe nothing will change. So I can't stop pursuing. Right? Maybe for a moment, but not for much longer than that. Before I have to quickly ask myself, did that 30 seconds in silence help me? Did it solve my problem? And usually the answer that you come up with is no. It didn't solve my problem. So that's why most people don't give stillness or silence much time, much attention, Because that's in life. That's that's how we show what we value, is it not? Whatever you give your time and attention to, that's what you value, right? That's the proof. So you can say, you can be on the phone with somebody, go, sweetheart, no, I know we haven't gone out for 3 weeks, but you're the most important thing in my life, and I'm going to call you tomorrow, and whatever it is. 2 weeks later, yes, you are. You are the most important thing in my life, really. I swear to God, I love you more than breath itself, and I'm just really busy right now. And you see what I mean? Or or parent with the the changer, thank you, remote, and they have their little 3-year-old that wants to sit on their lap, oh, I love you, honey, you're the most important thing in my life, just give me 30 minutes here. Right? And actually, all it's just showing us is what we actually value. That's what we invest our time with. Right? Whatever we're taking to occupy our time is what we value. We may say we value all sorts of things, but if you ever want to know what you actually value, just look at what you give the most time to. Then you'll see, oh, that's what I value, because that's what I'm giving my most precious commodity, which is my time and my attention. Pretty simple, isn't it? Right? So, when you see how little time and attention we actually give to that inner simplicity of stillness and silence. And I'm not saying how much time every day do you spend meditating. That's not so relevant. I mean, how much do we actually give attention to that inner stillness? Whether you're meditating or not, whether you're living a very relatively full, busy existence, going to work, going shopping, whatever it is, do we actually give that sort of inner stillness much time, much attention?